For over a year, there were hints, not official releases, but signals, that something major was being prepared for retirees. The administration's approach to taxes has been assertive, yet typically followed a visible pattern. But this spring, that pattern vanished. To those who watch policy, a silent IRS is the loudest warning. The quiet reshuffling of key personnel, new specialized training for auditors focusing on retirement funds, unusual budget shifts toward divisions handling older taxpayers, a halt in public advice updates. All these indicators went dark earlier this year. And history tells us when Washington goes quiet, a storm is usually brewing. By March, tax professionals were cautioning their older clients. Many shrugged it off. Promises had been made about protecting seniors, about easing the tax load on retirement income. But there's a vast canyon between a political promise and an enacted policy. The reality that arrived this Monday morning reveals just how wide that canyon truly is. The Treasury Department issued what it called updated guidance for the 2026 tax year, including provisions affecting older Americans that haven't seen major revision in decades. The IRS only makes these kinds of foundational changes when it's pointing toward a significant new priority, a major revenue push, an enforcement overhaul, or a basic rewrite of how retirement income is handled. Analysts scrambled to determine which path this was, or if it was all three simultaneously. But one truth was undeniable. The agency's stance toward senior taxpayers has shifted. And when a shift like this happens without fanfare, every financial planner in the country takes immediate notice. So, what does this new guidance actually say, and why should it matter to you? The alert from top accounting bodies this week was extraordinary. It was not a standard memo. It was a clarion call. Experts, after emergency meetings, labeled the IRS's action as substantial, potentially costly, and critically effective right now for 2026 planning. But new rules only hurt taxpayers who delay. Savvy retirees won't wait. In fact, their reaction to this news needs to be one of the most decisive financial steps they've taken in recent memory. Here's what we've learned. Within just 3 days of the Treasury's release, major investment firms began overhauling their retirement planning tools. These weren't simple tweaks. These were core system recalculations, the kind that only happen when advisors are bracing clients for a seismic shift in the tax landscape. Now, sources inside the wealth management community confirm the IRS has instituted new compliance rules for retirement accounts. This includes targeting traditional IRAs that were recently switched to Roth accounts, a move many used for tax efficiency. The IRS moved before many could finish their conversion strategies. They adjusted the math for mandatory withdrawals. They altered the calculations for Social Security benefits. They focused on inherited accounts that were set up to spread tax burdens across generations. In essence, the IRS took aim at the very framework of senior tax strategy. The plan's designed to make retirement affordable. This explains the accounting profession's severe urgency. The IRS's play wasn't just paperwork, it was a direct action. It's the type of regulatory pivot that could mean an extra $3,000 to $12,000 out of a typical retiree's pocket each year if they do nothing. And the advisory community's response was forceful, not panicked, but strategic. They didn't tell clients to fear. They told them to review their current tax withholdings without delay. They instructed them to recompute their estimated tax payments before the April deadline. And here's where the situation grows even more serious. Some in Treasury now think this latest guidance was a test, a probe to see how retirees would react after years of relaxed enforcement. Would they just accept a higher effective tax rate? The answer, so far, is a resounding no. The financial planning industry didn't advocate passive acceptance. They launched an educational offensive so thorough and coordinated that it drew the gaze of the IRS itself. Getting noticed by the IRS isn't easy, but this week, the planning community managed it. Anonymous policy experts speaking to financial outlets have described the shift as a strategic repositioning, a bid to maximize revenue from America's fastest-growing taxpayer group. But retirees who are proactive can demonstrate this week that they are both aware and agile. Their moves must not only be swift, but meticulously calculated to shield every possible dollar from unnecessary taxation. That level of precision sends its own message. It tells the IRS that American seniors are not just subjects of tax policy, they are active players in securing their own financial destinies. As more reports surfaced, the scale of the new guidance became clearer. The standard deduction for single filers over 65 rose to $15,700, forcing a rethink of deduction strategies. The IRS revised provisional income limits that hadn't been touched since the 1990s. With bigger enforcement budgets, Treasury reportedly broadened the criteria the IRS uses to select senior tax returns for audit. This wasn't a routine update. This was a fundamental recalibration. This was strategic repositioning. And that is precisely what has been hardest for retirees to predict since the pandemic threw normal planning into disarray. For every potential tax benefit discussed, the IRS has now introduced complications that upend simple assumptions. Many believed taxes on Social Security would vanish. They thought rules for retirement accounts would only become more lenient. They assumed the IRS would go easier on older taxpayers as a political courtesy. This week paints the opposite picture. Social Security taxation brackets stayed flat despite rising costs. Required withdrawal ages are being reassessed using new longevity tables, and the IRS's budget for policing retirement accounts jumped by 19%. What makes this moment so urgent is that this IRS action comes as the federal government faces intense fiscal strain. Congress debates permanent cuts. Treasury seeks stable revenue. Social Security needs solvency. Medicare requires adjustments. All this unfolds under the shadow of a national debt surpassing $36 trillion. When a government under this much pressure makes abrupt regulatory moves, it's not acting from a position of strength, it's acting from necessity. That means retirees aren't looking at temporary tweaks. They're confronting structural changes that will endure, no matter who wins the next election. The Treasury's guidance, now in the hands of every major tax software company, was crafted to signal that the federal government is unwilling to let continued revenue erosion from the senior demographic go unchecked. Officials stated plainly that current uses of retirement accounts stray from the original purpose of the laws. That's bureaucratic language for a simple truth. Seniors have been too effective at limiting their tax bills, and now the gaps are being closed. You don't hear that kind of frankness from Treasury unless billions are on the line. And indeed, roughly $400 billion in annual revenue from Americans over 65 is what the government believes it should be collecting. Meanwhile, the president addressed a rally of senior supporters this week with pointed remarks. "We will safeguard Social Security," he said. "Your benefits are secure." He added, "The IRS should serve you, not hassle you." And, "Seniors built this nation, and we will ensure they can afford to live in it." These are not just applause lines. They are statements from a political operation that recognizes the power of the senior vote. But words from a podium and words in the Federal Register often travel down very different roads. And what the IRS published this week demands your attention, irrespective of any political speech. The concern deepens because the IRS's move wasn't alone. Around the same time, the Social Security Administration announced new methods for computing benefits. Medicare confirmed Part B premium hikes that will hit middle-income retirees. State tax agencies increased data sharing with federal systems to track retirement income. When multiple government arms move in unison within a 30-day window, a larger strategy is at work. That strategy appears to be a wholesale reevaluation of how retirement income is taxed at every level of government. Financial experts are now weighing several scenarios. 1. The IRS is laying groundwork to make current tax brackets permanent, requiring it to find revenue elsewhere, like retirement accounts. 2. Treasury is trying to set legal precedents that will outlast any future administration. 3. The possibility that troubles advisors most. The IRS is trying to make higher effective tax rates for seniors the new normal before the next election cycle. But informed retirees can take that worry off the table today. They don't have to accept default withholding. They don't have to pass on potential Roth conversion windows. They don't have to miss quarterly deadlines. They can act with strategy, starting right now. What we're witnessing is a test of financial awareness. The IRS is watching to see how many seniors will just pay higher taxes without a fuss. Financial advisors are fighting to show their clients are ready and shielded. Treasury wants to avoid budget shortfalls, and seniors want to stop their nest eggs from eroding. The result hinges entirely on who moves first and who moves smartest. We've spoken to planners who are now checking client accounts daily. They warn the new withdrawal tables could force 8% to 12% larger minimum distributions for some. They say windows for Roth conversions might be snapping shut faster than expected, and they believe the IRS's decision to audit more retirement accounts is part of a wider push to maximize collections before any future reforms. But the answer isn't fear. The answer is preparation. The response from seniors this month, informed, strategic, and timely, will send a dual message. To the IRS, that American retirees understand the game, and to their families, that protecting their retirement is a non-negotiable priority. In the coming weeks, more details will emerge about Treasury's ultimate goal, but we already know the advisors' warnings were vital. They decoded complex regulations, they pinpointed immediate steps, and they reminded millions that tax planning is a lifelong process, even in retirement. What happens next depends on what seniors do in the next 60 days. If they act, this will be remembered as a wake-up call that fortified retirement security. If they pause, the IRS has shown it is ready to collect and enforce. Tonight, for the first time in a long time, the IRS is recalibrating. More guidance is pending, clarifications are expected, and when Washington falls silent, it means they are computing. They are choosing their next step with care. Because this week, American seniors demonstrated a lesson governments have learned before. Informed taxpayers adapt, prepared retirees respond, and underestimating seniors is always a strategic error. This story continues, but tonight, one fact is undeniable. The 2026 tax environment for retirees has changed at its foundation. Getting ready is no longer a suggestion, it's a requirement. And the time to move is now, before the April 15th deadline makes your choices for you. We'll be tracking every new detail as this next chapter unfolds. If this breakdown helped you understand what's at stake, do me a favor and hit the like button. It helps my channel get this crucial information to more seniors who need it.